Tim Anderson. I am the presenter for this particular course of active shooter response. All right. I'm a retired police officer from Massillon. 25 years of service there. Army veteran, 7 years active, 3 in the National Guard. Nice place to visit, didn't want to live there. I'm currently the field sports director at Seven Ranges Scout Reservation, and I've been involved in the BSA since 1979. All right. Active shooters. Shortly after, or just this past year rather, the U.S. Secret Service Department published a study that covered 5 years, from 2016 to 2020, of 173 mass attacks, not just active shooters, but mass attacks over a 5-year period, 173 incidents. There's like 70 pages to the document that they put out. Locations around the country, of the 173, a lot of them clustered in where you would expect large population areas and centers. A couple of states didn't get hit at all, which is fortunate for them. And in Ohio, looking at Columbus, Cincinnati, Dayton, Toledo areas, that kind of thing. It looks like there were 3 or 4 incidences right around Columbus area. Not so much in Northeast Ohio, which is a good thing for us. Locations of the 173 attacks, they occurred in a variety of public and semi-public spaces across 37 states and the District of Columbia. Communities impacted range from a small town with a population of 390 to major cities of 8.6 million residents. So population density and all of that doesn't play a big factor, other than there's more incidences where there are larger populations, obviously. The majority of the attacks took place in public locations that are freely accessible to the general population. Out of 119 of those attacks, 69%. 1/3 occurred in sites considered semi-public, including certain workspaces, workplaces, educational institutions, and houses of worship, churches, synagogues, that type of thing. There is some overlap because some of these attacks occurred in multiple places that covered different areas at the same time. Of the types, business, 88 incidents there, open spaces, 60, parks, ball fields, things like that where people gather. Education, that ranges from elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, colleges, that kind of stuff. And it's kind of spread out in those areas as well. Overview of the attacks. 173 incidents in which 3 or more people, not including the perpetrator, were harmed during an attack in a public or semi-public space in the U.S. over the 5-year period. January 2016 to December 2020, all 5 years of that. Nearly all of the attacks, 97% of them, were carried out by individuals, lone perpetrators. Of the 5 remaining attacks, 3 were perpetrated by 2 attackers, and 2 attacks were carried out by 3 people. Not every mass attack involves a firearm to cause harm to others. Only 126 of these 173 were done with firearms of some type: pistol, rifle, shotgun. 28 were done with bladed weapons. 18 were done with vehicles. Okay? They included those attacks as well. They didn't want to just limit this to just firearms. Okay. 6 were done with blown objects, 3 with incendiary devices, 3 with explosives, and 1 classified as other. Probably, most likely hands, feet, that kind of thing. Of course, it's hard to take on a whole bar if that's your intent to cause mass harm to people. Motives of these individuals. Right. Across the 173 incidents, the most common component of motive were related to grievances, ideological, bias-related, or political beliefs, and psychotic symptoms, which means they had a mental health issue going on at the same time. In total, 130 attacks, 75%, were motivated in whole or in part by one or more of these top 3 motives. Okay. Not all the attackers had multiple motives behind it, but many of them did, obviously. 75% of the attackers did. They had some other reason. And under grievances, they break that down into personal grievance, domestic grievances, and workplace grievances. Here's the terminology of going postal. Okay, that would be considered a workplace grievance. Okay, got fired from the job, irritated at the boss, gave you a bad review, whatever it might be, and they come back with a firearm and start taking out their co-workers and the boss. Over the 5-year period, just 18% of them were ideological or bias-related or political beliefs. Okay, more recent years, leading up to about 2020, and more so since then, with the big push against anti-Islamic and such like that, attacks on mosques and such. All right. 7% of these individuals over the 5-year period just had a desire to kill. They maybe fantasized about being able to kill a large number of people, become famous, fame and notoriety, right up in there. Sometimes those two things go hand in hand. They just want to kill and they want to be famous for it. Okay. Undetermined amount, which means the cause of the attacks were never determined. Okay, not conclusively anyway by the study. Resolutions to the attacks. All right. Over half of the attacks, 56%, the attackers stopped causing harm on their own. Okay. Most of these attackers were then arrested, including 5 who remained at the scene waiting for law enforcement response. There was one individual. A lot of times they'll call 911, either while it's going on or just before it starts, sometimes afterward. One of these attackers departed the scene, and when he was unable to get through to a dispatcher, returned to the scene to turn himself in. Okay. Clearly he was looking for help with whatever issues he had going on, okay, after he had already done the damage, okay, and killed at least 3 people. All right. Many also committed suicide, 42 of those 173. I'm sorry, 180 actually is the total number of attackers, 173 incidents. Either as part of the attack or after they left the scene. A good number of them, the 56%, either arrested at the scene, committed suicide as part of the attack, committed suicide away from the scene after they left the area, or killed by law enforcement away from the scene. Many of you might remember that the attack we had was in Memphis, the school attack. She got in there, killed 3 children and 3 teachers, okay, and used a rifle to do so. The glass door didn't stop her from getting in to the building. The door was secured. She shot the door, walked right through it, okay. Mass attackers. Do you know why they choose schools and areas like that? They're easy, soft targets. They're not going to get stopped before they do the damage that they want to do, okay. So our country, we managed to give these folks mass targets to go after, okay? Soft targets, something easy to hit and get away with. And a lot of times they're not expecting to live through it. A lot of times they're anticipating getting killed either by law enforcement or shooting themselves because they don't want to be captured. It happens. And just in this 5-year study, that holds true. Nearly 1/4 of the incidents, 22%, the attackers ceased causing harm due to law enforcement intervention, including 24 in which the attackers were killed by law enforcement at the scene. Other incidences ended due to bystander intervention, 18 of those, or when the weapon became inoperable. This includes 11 vehicular attacks where a crash caused the vehicle to stop running and they couldn't do any more damage with that. The attackers themselves, the 173 attacks in the study were carried out by 180 attackers, individuals. Nearly all of the 180 were in the study were male. 3 attackers were transgender, assigned female at birth, but known to identify as male at the time of their attacks. The remaining 5 attackers were females. Their ages ranged from 14 to 87, with an average age of 34. Nearly half of the attackers were white, non-Hispanic, 47%, and 1/3 were black, 62 or 34%. Lower percentages were seen across other racial and ethnic categories, including white, Hispanic, Asian, American Indian, and multiracial attackers. And there were more than 5 of them that were undetermined, most likely multiracial. They couldn't pin it down to a specific race. The reason why they try to narrow that down is mostly for statistical information, just to break it down. The first part of that presentation came from the data from the Secret Service that conducted that study. Okay, the study itself is like 70 pages long in the booklet they produced for that. The remainder of this portion is the response that we do for camp. Okay, so if you see references to summer camp, that's what this refers to. The last couple of years I've done this for our staff so that we're aware of what we need to do in case somebody comes onto the property and starts to cause problems. An active shooter is an individual or individuals actively engaged in killing or attempting to kill people in a confined and populated area. In most cases, active shooters typically use firearms, and there is usually no pattern or method to the selection of the victims. Sometimes there is, sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it's targeted, other times it's random. Okay. Active shooter situations are unpredictable and they will evolve quickly. Typically, the immediate deployment of law enforcement is required to stop the shooting and mitigate harm to the victims. For Carroll County, the county response time to our camp is about 15 minutes or more, okay, depending on where a deputy happens to be at any given time. And it will be over an hour for any SWAT teams to start arriving. Okay? Because active shooter situations are often over within 10 to 15 minutes before law enforcement arrives on the scene, individuals must be prepared both mentally and physically to deal with an active shooter situation. Good practices for dealing with an active shooter situation is be aware of your environment and avoid possible dangers or suspicious persons. Okay? If it's the middle of July and the individual is running around in a long black trench coat, keep an eyeball on him. He might be up to something. I'm not saying he is, maybe he just likes to dress that way in the summertime. But if they're dressed and it's not appropriate for the weather that's going on, everybody else running around in shorts and t-shirts, okay, he might be up to something. Take note of the 2 nearest exits in any camp building that you are in, doors and windows. Windows make good exits too, even if they're closed, all right? Put a chair through that thing and get out of the building if you have to. All right? Direct campers away from the area of the active shooter. All right? Only as a last resort attempt to take the active shooter down. When the shooter is at close range and you cannot flee, your chance of survival is much greater if you try to incapacitate them with whatever weapons you may have at hand. Use your imagination. If you've got a pen, that becomes a weapon if you have to have it. Okay? Right. I refuse to use plastic pens because they bend too easy. I like the metal ones, all right? Because it can make a good weapon if you have to, all right? If you're cornered, gunman's coming over to you, or he's got a big old buck knife and he's fixing to slit your throat, he's within arm's reach. You can get at him and defend yourself. All right? Do what you got to do to survive. All right? Call 911 only when it is safe to do so, okay? Don't get on the phone and call mom and dad. Okay, or your cousin or whatever. Say, hey, what should I do? Okay, call 911. Okay, they're in a better position to try to get you some assistance. Give a full description of the shooters, age, race, clothing, weapons, location on the property. Okay, particularly when it comes to camp, or even areas where you might be taking your unit camping. Okay, be very descriptive about where you are at. Okay, law enforcement may not be familiar with the property that you're at. Okay. At camp, that could be a problem, especially if they don't do any kind of training on our properties. I wish they would. In fact, we may, at some point, I'll suggest that to the ranger and council and stuff that we need to have Carroll County sheriffs come do a training session once or twice a year or whatever. Obviously not while we're there using it, but during the week, hey, come on down. You can learn the layout of the camp. All right. Here's our admin building. Here's our dining hall. Here's our trading post. That kind of stuff. That way, they're kind of familiar with it if they got to respond. All right. Be specific and descriptive. If you just tell them, yeah, the third tent on the left, okay, they have no idea what you're talking about. Okay. Or campsite. If you give them a campsite name, they have no idea. Okay. They don't have time to be looking for the signs that point you in different directions. And if they come in through the backside of camp, there are no signs coming in that direction to show them where the campsites are at. Only going in, if you've noticed that. All right. In July of 2011, a summer camp near Oslo, Norway was attacked by a lone gunman. They actually did a movie about this, and I watched it. It was rough. It took the authorities nearly an hour and a half to get to the camp and stop the shooter, who surrendered immediately. As soon as the officer showed up, he laid down his firearms and gave up. Just like that. He had no intention of dying there, but he wanted to create as much havoc as possible. He had killed 68 people before being taken into custody at the camp. The first 2 people to go were the security, I don't know if he was an officer, but he was in charge of security of the camp, and the camp director. Those were the first 2 people to go. A few hours earlier, he had detonated a car bomb in the government center in Oslo, killing 9 people there. Authorities believe it was more of he was trying to distract from what his ultimate goal was to get to that camp. The attacks were motivated by political issues, and his targets of choice were associated with the Labour Party. The summer camp was sponsored by and run for the children of Labour Party members. That was his target. He intended to get to them. This particular camp was located on an island that you had to take a ferry boat to get to. That's part of the reason why it took law enforcement almost an hour and a half to get there. They didn't have boats in order to get over to the island. He was sentenced to the maximum allowed under Norway law, 21 years. Okay? And further evaluation at the end of that 21 years, if they determined that he was still a threat to society, they could give him an extra 5 years. So he's about halfway through his sentence now. What a wonderful thought, and then he'll be turned back loose into their society. In the unlikely event that an active shooter would gain entry to our camp, and if they know anything at all of our daily operations, mass gathering times, meal times, a determined individual can cause a lot of carnage in a short period of time. Consider as an example, the camp dining hall holds anywhere from 250 to 500 plus people at a time during the meals. Any given week during the camp season. How much damage can be done in that environment? All right. A recommended response in such a case would be to get all the campers out of the dining hall as quickly and orderly as possible. Instruct them to gather at their shower house. Everybody in camp, if they've been there longer than a hot minute or so, generally knows where their shower house is at for their campsite. Okay? It's a permanent structure which will provide some cover and allow them to observe from a distance if the active shooter would approach their position and allow them time to evade the shooter. Right? Now, when I say gather at the shower house, I don't mean in the shower house. We're not looking for a tornado here. All right? We're not looking for cover out of the rain and the weather. When we tell them to get to the shower house, gather around or behind, okay, the shower house, because it's a building. Okay, bullets are going to be slowed down by buildings, generally speaking. And all of ours are wood, so bullets can pass through, but we stand a much better chance of survival if we're behind it and keep an eye on if the shooter's approaching or not. It is important to remain calm and provide direction to the campers. If you panic, they'll panic, right? You as a leader need to remain calm. Keep your wits about you, all right? Never think that it can't happen here. It certainly could, and how you respond may mean the difference between life and death for yourself and others. Now, regrettably, death will most likely occur. You cannot prevent that with any reasonable certainty. Okay. Law enforcement response. When law enforcement does show up, okay, their purpose is to stop the active shooter as soon as possible, unless you're from Texas, in which case that's a whole other thing. Officers will proceed directly to the area in which the last shots were heard. Officers may arrive in teams of 2 to 4. Okay? I went through this training myself as a Massillon officer, and we were taught that you arrive on scene. If you're the first one there, wait for a second unit to show up. And then the 2 of you get in that building and do whatever is necessary to get to that shooter and stop it. Okay? By whatever means necessary. All right? So they may show up in teams of 2 to 4 initially. Okay? And they're going to start moving in. Officers may wear regular patrol uniforms. or external bulletproof vests, Kevlar helmets, or other tactical equipment. Depends on what their department's issuing. Deputies in Ohio wear the same uniform no matter what county they're in. Okay? Black shirt, gray trousers with a black stripe down the side. SWAT teams may wear green, dark blue, or black uniforms. The SWAT uniforms will sometimes vary in colors depending on the county, but the regular patrol uniforms are all identical. Okay? With the gray shirt, the patches, they're all identical as far as that goes. Officers may be armed with patrol rifles, shotguns, or handguns. Okay? They've all got handguns. Whether they're carrying a shotgun or a rifle will depend upon what their department gave them, what they're qualified to use, and such. They may have canines. They may be deployed to search for and apprehend suspects. Officers may shout commands and may push individuals to the ground for their safety. Okay? They tell you to get on the ground, get on the ground. Okay? Don't sit there and don't stand there and try to argue with them or point out things to them. Okay? Trust me, they see everything around what's going on. Okay? You get on the ground and then you can start describing if there's something special that you think they need to be aware of. The first officers to arrive on the scene will not stop to help injured persons. I'm bleeding. Sorry, I can't help you. I got to get to the shooter. Okay? Expect rescue teams comprised of additional officers and emergency medical personnel to follow the initial officers. I've lost track of the number of times I've heard the medics go, "We're going to stage." That means they're a couple blocks away from whatever's going on. They want us to secure the scene first. And that's fine. They have no way to defend themselves really, except, throw a Band-Aid at them or something. All right. The rescue teams will treat and remove any injured persons. They may also call upon able-bodied individuals to assist in removing the wounded from the area. Okay. At camp, our main parking lot will likely be our staging area. That's where EMS is going to arrive. And that's only going to be after the shooter's been neutralized. Okay. Once the shooter's been taken care of, then EMS and everybody else will start coming in and cleaning up and taking care of business. In the aftermath of an active shooter incident, once an active shooter incident is concluded, the shooter's been neutralized, either taken into custody or DOA, the process of rescue and recovery begins. Locate and account for all staff and campers. Canine search and rescue may be called in to assist. Okay? Provide first aid to the injured. We're all scouts. We all know how to do basic first aid. Right? Every troop trailer has got a first aid kit in it, right? Everybody should be doing this. Okay? Assist in evacuating the injured to the main parking lot for further medical assistance. Statements will be required for investigation by law enforcement. Be available and be cooperative. Okay? No statements will be released to any media source, including social media. Post nothing. Okay? Don't get your cell phone out and start taking pictures. Look what we just did. Don't do that, please. Okay? All you're doing is creating bigger headaches for council later on down the road. The only spokesperson for the Buckeye Council is the Scout Executive or designee. All right? Our Scout Executive is the only one that's authorized to be talking to the media, okay, and releasing statements about anything that might have occurred. An active shooter event will likely shut down the camp for the season. This will be determined by the Scout Executive and the camp director. Okay? They'll put their heads together and determine whether they should or could continue at that point. All right, questions? That's my contact info if you need to get a hold of me for anything. If you have other questions. Are there any questions at this time? Come on, give me something. Make it challenging. I love questions. If you're out with your unit at a public campground, let's say, okay, likely they won't have security at the campground. Okay, more likely it'll be the campground owner, okay? And maybe him and his oldest kid are, every once in a while, they'll walk around the campgrounds, okay? That's not really security, okay? But all they're doing is keep an eye on things, all right? They're not there to provide armed security, most likely, okay? But they could. In Ohio, we now have, well, we've always had open carry, but we now have concealed carry without permits. As long as you are legally allowed to carry a firearm, you can, unless it's a restricted area, such as courthouses, schools, okay? Most government buildings, you're not allowed to carry in those places, okay? Any place else, if Say you go to Walmart, and they're infamous, they'll have a little sign in the window, no firearms on the premises. What is it, if you're a bad guy and you don't follow the laws anyway, what does that do for you? Soft target, opportunities. You want to cause death and destruction, that's what's going to happen at, in those soft areas, okay? I carry at Walmart all the time, but I'm a police officer too, so I'm allowed to. All they can do is ask you to leave the property if they find out you're carrying a firearm. That's all they can do. There is no criminal offense attached to it. Okay? They can only ask you. Now, if you refuse to leave, then you can be considered trespassing. Now it's a criminal offense. Okay? Fine. I'll take my business elsewhere. Have a beautiful day. Okay? But don't argue with knuckleheads because they don't get it. They really don't. They have no idea that they're much safer by your presence there if you're carrying concealed. They're much safer with you there than without. Okay? Because if you've got the training and you've done a little bit of practice with carrying, okay, and you know what you're doing with a firearm, you can save lives. Okay? A couple of years back, we had that fellow in that mall, Minnesota, I think it was. He managed to take out a shooter, and the shooter was looking to kill more people. I think he only killed two. He killed two, and then somebody responded with his own firearm and took the shooter out at a good distance too. Clearly that guy's got some range time. Anytime I hear stories about, well, the shooter survived, I thought, well, whoever stopped him needs more range time. They need more practice. All right. Questions? Come on, give me some questions.
I have a
Yes.
comment.
Yeah.
This sort of thing isn't always happen during the summer.
Yeah, it could happen any time of the year. So.
I don't know how many people are familiar, but in 2018, the Sean Christie manhunt in Richland County.
I vaguely remember that one.
He was, I don't know, he made threats against the president and all sorts of things.
Oh,
So we
that
had
happens
feds-
all the time, actually.
Well, we had feds involved and everything,
Right.
but he crashed on 71.
Okay.
And over 5 or 6 days, they were tracking him, and he ended up at a camp in Richland County,
Okay.
and he was apprehended at the camp. There was no one at the camp was hurt or anything. There's no involvement really from the camp, but
I was trying to evade being captured.
he was trying to evade being captured. He ended up at the camp.
Right.
At that point, law enforcement did not inform the camp that they thought that he might be on the property.
Okay.
So that is also a consideration, as remote as the property is in Seven Ranges specifically.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's possible. If you've ever seen an overhead view of the camp, say Google Maps,
Yeah.
right? We've got a lot of wooded area around the outer perimeter of the camp,
Right.
and plenty of points of entry. There's no fencing around the camp per se.
Right.
Okay. Every year, I got to put up warning signs along Meter Road, okay, or Apollo Road rather, on the east side of camp. That warn people that there's a shooting range in here. Don't trespass into here. Okay, there's no fence to stop them from doing so. They take their lives into their own hand. The warning signs are there. Don't go in here. You could get hurt. Okay, so there's no fence around the camp at all. In fact, to my knowledge, there's no fencing anywhere along our boundaries of the camp. So, plus you got Hutch's Trail that runs around the perimeter of the camp, stuff like that. Yeah, could somebody sneak onto the property? Yeah.
Or even unintentionally, that
Right.
they aren't aware that, I mean, the target might not be the camp, but they might end up at the camp too.
Yeah,
So, okay.
they're trying to get away, and
Right.
maybe they're looking for hostages so that they can, and it's possible too. The majority of those in that study, I don't believe any of them were hostage type situations. Most of them they were looking to cause damage.
Right.
They wanted to hurt as many people as possible, either because they knew them or had some agreements with them, or something along those lines. Lost my train there. Just keep an eye out. Be mindful of what's going on in the area. I know at camp we typically don't get news reports on the regular, okay, about anything going on in the area. Okay. Now, if for some reason the county would receive information that they've got something similar to that situation, they may or may not call the camp because they know we're there, they know we're operating, they know we've got a lot of people in a fairly confined area. Okay. And that's the reason why I usually, when I'm in the dining hall, I'm usually near the fireplace. I have a good view of the overall of the room. And that's just from habit, occupational hazard, if you will. Okay, because I can't sit with my back to a crowd of people. I can't. No.
So I guess I have a specific question about Seven Ranges. Who
Yeah.
is the incident commander there for?
Ultimately, the camp director,
Camp
reservation director, is ultimately in charge of the entire property. Okay. Tim Beadnell is going to be our reservation director this year. Okay. He's a retired firefighter, EMT, that kind of thing. So he's familiar with incident response and all that stuff. Okay. I'm on staff, and I'm a retired officer, so I know exactly how those things are handled as well. Let me think.
The point is there's a process there that.
Yeah. Yeah. And typically if we had an incident like this occur on camp, we would not be doing a camp-wide emergency type drill where you got the bugle blowing and all that stuff. Because what happens when we do that emergency drill every Monday afternoon after lunch, right? We're gathering everybody together at the dining hall or the SPL and the fire guards, right? We don't want that, okay? In an active shooter situation, we want everybody dispersed. So there's no bugle call for this, okay? There is a radio signal for it, okay? And all the directors, the area directors in the camp will know what that signal is, okay? It's the same one that hospitals use. It's code silver, okay? You heard of code blue, cardiac arrest thing in a hospital kind of thing, right? Code brown, which is not the thing you're thinking of, but it's another thing, okay? Code silver is actually the term it's the code for an active shooter situation in a hospital. Okay. There's no reason why we can't use that as well. All right. What would happen is somebody would have to get on the radio and say code silver at whatever the location is. Code silver at admin. Okay. That lets everybody else know if we're out and about in the areas and stuff that there's some kind of active shooter situation going on at admin. Right? Whatever area it is that they said there was. Okay. And that's assuming that you haven't already heard the gunshots. Okay? Yeah.
Does the people on staff with radios know that signal?
They should. I've been telling them the last couple of years. Last couple of years I've been doing this briefing. Okay, this training for our staff.
Is this the beginning of staff training or the end?
At the beginning. At the beginning. I put this together because in 21 we didn't have anything in place.
Staff training is an adventure.
But if for some reason the camp director were to get on the radio and say, okay, we're going to have a camp-wide emergency. Okay, well, that doesn't tell the person up in the front office to not hit the bugle call. Now we've got everybody gathering into the dining hall. That's a problem. Now you've given somebody, now you've provided targets, okay, for a shooter, that kind of thing, okay? With a code silver, everybody disperse. Keep an eyeball on what's going on, okay? Area directors, they're in charge of anybody that happens to be in their immediate area. Okay, I'm back in field sports. I would be in charge of anybody that's still, if you're in field sports, you stay in field sports. Okay, unless that's where the shooter's taking place, where the incident's happening. Okay, in which case you tell the scouts, because we don't want scouts running through camp. Okay, if you're in the program areas, stay in those program areas. Go to your camps. No, don't tell them to go to the campsite because that may be toward the knucklehead. Okay, and we don't want to put them in danger, obviously. All right. That's why I said if a shooter knows anything about the way we run camp, and 3 times a day at the minimum, we're all gathered in one place, right? If they wanted to do a lot of damage, that's where it would happen at. Okay. Somebody one time suggested to me, well, why don't we just close and lock the doors? First of all, it gets hot in there. We like those doors open for ventilation. Secondly, not very practical, okay? They're glass doors, glass windows, okay? They can be shot through easily, okay? That's not difficult to do, all right? There is no structure in the world that's really secure enough to keep a determined individual out, okay? Gold vault at Fort Knox, maybe, but okay. All right. Underground bunkers for our government. All right, those are secure facilities. All right, Cheyenne Mountain. big old blast doors on that thing? Yeah. Okay. Any other questions about how to react to? Keep an eye on things, all right? Be aware of your surroundings, all right? That type of thing. All right. Do whatever is necessary. Okay. If you and your group are cornered, hey, tell the shooter to come a little closer so you can talk to him. Come here, I got something for you. All right. You do whatever you got to do. Okay. To make sure you and as many of your individuals that you're taking care of can survive this. Okay. Questions? Nothing else. Tough crowd. Okay. Like I said, if you need to get a hold of me, you can find me easily. I'm at camp every summer. All right. I'm retired, so I got nothing better to do than be at camp. All right. Thank you very much.
Party.
The Ohio State University is home to historic landmarks and lifelong traditions. But in an instant, this scenic campus could become the backdrop to a scene that happens all too often across the country. Chances are you'll never face a situation like this one. But if you do, you need to be prepared. I'm Officer Adam Tabor with the OSU Police Division. I'm here to help you improve your chances of surviving an active shooter incident. The Ohio State University Police train countless hours to be prepared for emergency situations such as this. Our number one priority is to keep you safe. Make no mistake, you can survive an active shooter incident by remembering and planning ahead to take 3 important steps. Run, hide, fight. If an active shooter or similar incident requires the campus community to stay safe, our Emergency Management Division will send what's called a Buckeye Alert. These are often sent via text message as soon as possible after determining that a threat exists. A Buckeye Alert will contain the most accurate information available at the time, but an active shooter situation evolves rapidly and known details may be limited. That is why it's important for you to remain observant and use your senses to be attentive to your surroundings at all times. If you encounter an active shooter or receive a Buckeye Alert affecting your area, the first and best option to survive is run. Get out. Quickly and safely evacuate the area. If you can get out, do it. Scatter and run. Get as far away as you can. Once you're safe, call 911.
911, where is your emergency?
Make sure you tell the 911 operator, who may be located within the city's dispatch center, that you are on Ohio State's campus. Running away should always be your first priority. But what happens if you hear gunshots and you are unable to get out? Your second reaction should be to hide. If you're in a room, lock the door. Look for something to barricade entry points. Turn off lights. Silence your cell phone. The idea is to make it as hard as possible for the shooter to see you, find you, or get to you. And always spread out. Don't huddle together. That creates one easy target.
We're sending the alert now.
The alert says the shooter is in the building.
If running isn't an option and hiding isn't an option, there's one final reaction that you should only use as a last resort if confronted by the shooter: fight. Find anything to use as a weapon: a fire extinguisher, a chair. Fighting back is a last resort, but if it's between you and the shooter, we want you to survive. When preparing yourself mentally for this fight, remember something. Statistically, active shooters are apprehended or eliminated within the first 5 minutes of the incident. Once notified, our officers will respond to stop the shooter. You only need to fight until they do, and that could be 10 seconds away, the most important 10 seconds of your life. It's scary to think about, but an active shooter is something that we all need to be prepared for. Whether you're a student or a member of our faculty or staff, take time to know your surroundings. Know at least 2 exits out of your room and building. Take different routes into and out of your building to become familiar with every possible escape route. Look around in the room you're in right now. Find areas where you could hide or items you could use as weapons. 3 simple words could save lives, so remember: run, hide, fight.
I'm Officer Cassie Schaefer with the Ohio State University Police Division. Since we launched our Surviving an Active Shooter video in 2015, we've received more than 1 million views. We've also received many questions from our students, faculty, and staff. We're back to expand on our safety tips. As you learned in our first video, while it's scary to think about, you can survive an active aggressor situation by remembering 3 simple words: run, hide, fight. If you hear or see the attacker and you're able to dial 911 safely, give your name and location. Be prepared to tell the emergency dispatcher everything you see and hear so we can help notify your fellow Buckeyes. Once notified, police will immediately respond. When a Buckeye alert is issued, the first message you receive may be generic in order to inform you of an unfolding emergency as quickly as possible. More information, including a location, will be shared soon. Even those not in the same area or building may be asked to shelter in place. Get to an interior room and lock doors or barricade doors, if possible. Text loved ones to let them know you're okay. Avoid dialing 911 simply for information. Dispatchers will be busy taking emergency calls from victims and witnesses. Updates will be shared via Buckeye Alert or on the emergency.osu.edu website. If you're outside, be aware of your surroundings and evacuate the area or seek shelter. More detailed information will be shared soon. Remember the run, hide, fight motto. The option you choose will be heavily dependent on where you are and your proximity to the attacker. Hopefully you've already prepared or at least thought about how you would do all 3. If you see the attacker or know they're in the area, your first option is to run. Escape the area. If exiting through doorways or hallways appears unsafe, you may be able to escape through a window. You may have to break the glass. Find a heavy object and stand clear. Place clothing or other material over the broken glass to prevent cuts or injuries, or scrape it away before climbing through. Get as far away as possible and dial 911 to report what you saw and heard. If you feel, given the information known at the time, that hiding or barricading yourself is your best option, try to find a nearby room. Don't worry about securing the building's main entrance or exterior doors. If the door to the room you're hiding in does not lock, block or barricade doors. Use furniture, a belt, or extension cord to secure doorways. Utilize anything that makes it harder for the attacker to find you or get to you. If furniture can't be moved or the door can't be locked where you are, you may choose to hide in another room if it is safe to move. Turn out lights and silence your cell phone to make it harder for the attacker to find you. Only open the door for law enforcement.
Police!
If you're unsure if the individual is an officer, call 911 to confirm the officers are at your location. Make sure you tell the 911 operator you are on Ohio State's campus. Fighting is always your last resort, but may become necessary, so you should prepare. While in hiding or behind a barricade, look for things you can use as weapons and prepare a plan should the attacker gain entrance, forcing you to fight. Spreading out and using the distraction technique will make it more difficult for an attacker to target you and may allow for an escape opportunity. If the attacker enters the room, throw books, bags, and other objects to disorient the attacker. If necessary, swarm the attacker as a group. Grab onto arms and legs. If the weapon comes free, kick it away or put it in a trash can away from the attacker. A group can incapacitate the attacker and take them to the ground. Police are on the way. Restrain the attacker until they arrive. Your decision to run, hide, or fight is based on the information you know and your proximity to danger. Stay informed via the Buckeye Alert System. While we want you to make decisions for your own safety, we also hope that you have the safety of your fellow Buckeyes in mind. Do not take actions that would jeopardize the safety of others around you. We encourage faculty to dedicate a few minutes on the first day of classes to watch our Surviving an Active Shooter video. Have a conversation with your class about what to do in an emergency and point out the exits or escape routes. Discuss ways to secure or barricade the room. Most importantly, have an emergency plan and be prepared. Our Department of Public Safety has a full training program on surviving an active aggressor attack and can offer additional training to classes or departments upon request.
Code Silver, Code Silver.
Medical center employees responsible for patient care have different roles and responsibilities. Follow our Code Silver procedure and ensure patient safety. Now that you know the basics, it's time to learn more about how you may be able to help us prevent an active attack. First, know the warning signs. Pay attention to clues that may lead to strange or overly aggressive behavior. Have you seen someone make violent gestures towards another person? Have you seen or heard someone make comments about harming themselves or others? Or has someone shown an unhealthy obsession with weapons or violence? You may just have a gut feeling that something isn't right. These can all be warning signs of a bigger issue, and we need your help to identify these situations. If you see something, say something. Report suspicious or concerning behavior to the Ohio State University Police Division or local law enforcement. Our officers are trained to assess situations and offer support services to distressed persons. Like you, our goal is for the safety of everyone, including the well-being of the person in crisis. Add OSU PD's non-emergency number to your list of contacts and always dial 911 in emergencies. Those on regional campuses can also reach OSU PD dispatchers by dialing 614-292-2121. For off-campus incidents, dial your local law enforcement agency. Look out for your fellow Buckeyes in advance by speaking up if you notice something concerning, and remember these 3 simple words could save lives: run, hide, fight.